Hello, Lauren. Lo-
Hello, Danyah.
Lovely to see you. Lovely to see you. Gosh, it's really lovely for you to come and chat to me. And I know that we have a passion in common, don't we? Which is Pippi Longstocking. And I wanted to talk to you about that and about other things, if you're up for that. And we have our various relationships with Pippi, me through a couple of theatre productions, one musical and one solo show, and you through your illustrations, which date back a long time, don't they? Because you first did one, which I love, gosh, what, over 10 years ago or something?
I think 2007, something like that, I think,
Wow.
looking it up.
Yes.
So yes, it's a long time ago now. And yeah, it doesn't seem very long ago at all. So.
And you've now, it's about to be released in October, Pippi Goes Aboard, and it's a fully illustrated new edition which Oxford University Press is putting out, which is very, very exciting. I'm really looking forward to seeing it. What were the differences between then in 2007 and now? Has it changed? What's
in my work or my approach to it?
Yes, maybe, or how you feel about it. Yeah, just what's the difference? Because obviously it's a long time, isn't it, where you've lived with this glorious character.
Yes, I've been making some little short films about the making of this book, because I just thought sometimes people are interested in your thought process and how you work.
Yeah.
And that was quite interesting to do, because it made me think more clearly about how it is particularly to revisit something. So the first book, I sort of, it's a bit of a blur now, but I seem to remember that I knew quite clearly how I wanted it to look, which was as if this child, who's such a sort of big character, as if she can't be held on the page because she's so energetic, and her personality is huge. So
Yeah.
you'll always see her kind of moving out of the frame, I guess. And so half on, half off a page, or just some legs appearing. And I knew that I wanted the type to be part of the illustration, so work with the pictures. So it's almost picture itself. So all of that, the design and the illustration were sort of hand in hand with each other. So I work very closely with the designer, because when I draw, I'm also drawing where the type might go. And it's very snipped paper, so it's very, very flat. So it's not about realism, it's not about getting her to hold something and you really believe that she's holding it. It's about the energy of the character. So you're trying to suggest that she's strong just by the way that you draw her and the way that things are placed on the page. And it was strange to go back and all these years later do a second book, because inevitably there are things I would do differently. And I found it quite hard to get back into the drawing style, because lately, in the last few years, I've been drawing much more in a much more detailed way. And so with my most recent work, which is probably Mary Poppins and Hubert Horatio, you'll notice that the drawing, there's more realism to it, more roundness and form and detail in it. And Pippi is not about that. It's all about very pointy chins and very kind of splayed fingers. It's not about drawing hands beautifully.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because I have the same thing when I work on a show. Then when I go back to it, having to look at it again, and it doesn't stay static, does it? It
No.
moves as we move and as we grow as artists or as individuals. So it's been really interesting. But I think the idea of doing videos to show people how you work is really exciting. As I've said to you before, that when I read your books, I've read a number of them, I love how the typography is part of the illustration and the illustration is part of the words. I find that really really enjoyable and sort of visceral. I really like that. And you were first introduced to Pippi as a child, weren't you? And so was that why you took it on? Because I know you write your own stories and illustrate your own stories. And this is slightly different.
Yes, it's very different because really up until the time I took that commission on, I was doing very, very little illustrating for anyone else. In fact, I'd sort of started very early on in my career doing a few commissioned works like that, but it didn't really suit me because you're always working to someone else's schedule, because you get the work when you're given it and you have no real control over your time. And I sort of got into books and illustration and writing really quite late compared to some people, or at least I got to a career very late compared to a lot of people. And I was sort of very eager to do as much work as I could, partly because I needed to financially, I had to, but also because I felt like there was a lot of catching up to do. And because I started getting commissioned and getting work, I just wanted to do it. I wanted to do as much as I could, and I was enjoying it. And so I really would turn down pretty much anything that I was asked to illustrate for someone else, because I didn't really feel able to do it. But when Pippi came along as a possibility, and I remember my agent saying, I'm sure the answer is no, but OUP were wondering if you'd illustrate it. And I said, yes, absolutely, I will. And it was because I knew that character inside out from being an 8 or 9 year old when I first read it. And I was so passionate about it as a child. And so in a way, she's sort of, I think you absorb books, particularly when you're little, they become part of who you are. And growing up, even older, they become, it's like watching a wonderful film or seeing a beautiful painting or piece of music that really means something to you. And I think they do become part of the very fabric of us. And I really feel like that with Pippi, that she is like that for me.
Yes. And she is extraordinary, isn't she? She's inspiring, she's powerful, she's brave, she's kind and generous. She's got a lot of texture and depth to her, and that's what I found, working on the musical, which took a long time for it to come onto stage. Really, really getting to know her. So I feel like she's a bit of a friend, and sometimes I'll think to myself, I wonder what Pippi would do in this circumstance. And I think that about this whole lockdown, I think, gosh, I wonder how Pippi would deal with it and how she might encourage and support children, because it's a really tough time, isn't it, for children, through from being very little to teenage. I get really concerned about children's emotional well-being and their anxiety about going back to school and how this will affect them. Do you have any thoughts about this period and how it's affecting children, and how we as creators and artists might be able to support families?
Oh, that is a big question. I mean, I think about it all the time, certainly. Not only because I have my own daughter, but because I'm very aware of it when I think about particularly families who are, there's a lot of people living in a smallish space, or you don't have any chance of, even a balcony or something. I think that's tough on anybody. I mean, I think that must be really hard, because I'm very lucky that we do have, even though it's a tiny garden, we have a garden, and just being able to stand outside in the air or sit outside, it's so important. And I realized that's one of the things I missed most, is that feeling that you can just leave your house and walk around. And I think there's a need, particularly for children. And my daughter, she just was kind of pulled outside. It was so vital to be outside. And I think that's very hard. I don't think, I mean, as human beings, we don't really, we like that sense that we can go where we need to go when we want to. And someone was asking me yesterday, what's been so hard, given that I'm a writer and illustrator, and you could say, well, you can do that without other people. Actually, it's just not true, because I need to talk to people. I need to see them. I need to walk outside. I need to keep moving to have ideas. I need to look and experience things. So it's really like so many people would say, it's just not that simple, because we are community. We like a lot of contact and communication.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And I think that we're storytelling beings, aren't we? So if there isn't a story, we'll make one up. We'll try and make sense of the world through story. And I have the same thing, where I think, gosh, I feel very privileged that I can weather this storm, because again, I have a small garden, and I have access to an outside walk, but also that I can put food on the table. And yes, I mean, it must be really devastating to be in a tiny, tiny contained space. But I also feel for teenagers. My daughter's a teenager, and they're just about to fly. They're just about to set off into the world, and suddenly the world has become very shut down. And how to navigate that, it's tough. And I suppose for me, how do I, as a storyteller, try and help people to go out into those magical worlds without having to leave home? And I feel that about your books, that Ruby Redford, for example, I haven't read all of the series, but she can take you somewhere, can't she?
Yeah, they're based on really my love of film. And when I was a child, I was absolutely obsessed with film and TV, and that being able to escape via a screen, just as you escape in a book, and that's a different kind of escape, equally powerful. But there was something about watching for me that also, you're seeing in pictures. So instead of the pictures in your head, which are incredibly powerful, you're seeing someone else's idea of a story visually. And I suppose I wanted to create stories that I would have loved when I was that sort of age. And I thought about the films of Alfred Hitchcock and how much I loved those, because they weren't all about the action. And as I've got older and written more, I've understood why they're so powerful, some of his films. I mean, I don't mean they're all suitable for someone young to watch, but there are some that I often talk about Rear Window, because that's a static, that's just a one scene in a way. He's there, he is in a room because he's broken a leg or something, and he's a photographer, and it's really interesting because it's all set in this one room. And it's all about how do you tell a story from somewhere very static, and it's kind of beautifully told in objects, in clothes, and just the view out of the window. And it sort of taught me a lot about how to make pictures, and how the design of them, and how the objects and costumes you pick for the actors, that tells a story, that tells you something about these characters. And it's very, very sophisticated the way it's done. But Ruby is like making this huge scene, this enormous scenery, but you're having to generate it from my description. And I try not to give too much description of character, because I want you, the reader, to be able to visualize your characters. So with the exception, I think, of maybe 3 or so characters, you don't really know very much about, what they look like. You don't know their ethnicity. You don't know some of the simplest things about them. You don't know their height. And I wanted that because we, the reader, often make the best scenery.
Yes. Oh, well, you definitely get that. So, because for me, I know what she looks like, and I know what the characters look like. Yeah, that's interesting. And also that the way you see the world is pictorially. And I love it when I chat to people who, we all see the world differently, don't we? We all learn differently. And so for me, it's often about the words, which is why I love the words in your books, because you do so much with them. And that's true of Goody, isn't it? I can see that in the back behind you. And I've got it behind me too. That's just recently been released, hasn't it?
Yes. Last week.
How did that come about? Because I really love it. I really loved reading it.
Thank you. Well, funnily enough, I think it has something, I mean, although it was written a long time ago and only illustrated last year, it has something in common with what we've been going through, because it's all about the way we get boxed in and limited. And in this case, the limits are the way we're described, the way pictures, not the pictures, but the words that are used often as a shorthand to describe us, how they can sort of make you feel a little bit trapped somehow, like you're struggling to get out of someone else's notion of who you are. And I remembered this very well from being a child, and I was always very frustrated by it, because someone could very casually describe one as lazy or thoughtless, or difficult or grumpy. And
I was called mean. If I didn't do something somebody wanted, I was mean. Yeah,
exactly. And I think those words are quite hard to drop.
Yes.
I sometimes find myself wrestling out of these memories of these descriptions, because I was often called lazy. And so now if I even sit down, I think I should be doing something. And it's a very powerful word. I mean, all of those words are very powerful. And then even the good things can be really difficult, because my sister was often referred to as clever. And actually that word can sort of hover around you, making you feel like a failure.
Yes.
When you're not achieving enough, or you're not doing well enough. And so this is a very sort of wry look at those things. It is comic. It's meant to be funny, but it also has a serious message, because it's not just that this happens to us in childhood, and it's also most of the time it's not badly meant, and we all have done it and do it, but I think it's something that we do to ourselves quite a lot as well.
Yeah.
You know, I hear people all the time describing themselves, you know, as in this way. I'm useless at such and such, and it almost becomes so. Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right, and that's what you were saying to me before about what you're saying in Goody, and then you juxtapose that with Pippi, who refuses all labels and, you know, casts them off. And I think it's exactly right that we do tend to decide who somebody is or what they are, and it's their action. So my dad, who was a teacher, would say at the beginning of the year when he had a new class, he would say, you've all got labels and you've all been told, you know, whether you're the good one, the bad one, the ugly one, whatever it is. And he said, we're putting all of those down and we're going to start now. And I'm not interested in other people's labels of you. Let's just meet each other. And I was really inspired by that because, you know, I would think to myself, am I a loud person trying to be quiet or a quiet person trying to be loud? And he would say to me, just don't go in any of the boxes. And
because actually inevitably we're all more than one thing, and so sometimes you're this and sometimes you're that, and sometimes you're a complete contradiction of anybody has decided you are because they've met you on one particular day or 10 years ago when perhaps you were a bit more anxious for a very good reason. And so I do really take that from Pippi, because I sort of think that is the trick to life. If you can, you know, she'll describe herself, Pippi, but she doesn't take on other people's descriptions of her. Yeah.
And she turns it on its head as well, doesn't she? So when the bullies talk about her flaming red hair, she doesn't take it as an insult.
No.
You know, it's like she'll just take it the way she wants to take it. And it's like, that's who I am, and that's no, it's lovely. But Goody, I would really recommend it. I did have a chuckle, but I also I loved the you know, the message, if you like, behind it.
Thank you.
And did you have, other than Pippi, did you have a favourite childhood book or chapter book or book?
I had many. I mean, a lot of favourites. Some of them because I loved the drawings. You know, there's the Moomins, there's Madeline. There are a lot of Quentin Blake stories. In fact, thinking of Quentin Blake, because he did the covers for some of the Betsy Byers books. She was an American author, and I loved her books, but I wouldn't have bought them if they didn't have Quentin's artwork.
Yes.
And I think it's because he provided a way in for me, and so there was something very I don't know, there's something very friendly about the way he draws a character, and it sort of drew me to it. And actually, so a book of hers called The 18th Emergency, I still think is one of the best children's books ever written, and I think it really made me a writer in a way, because she's got a beautiful way of writing character and humor. You know, she's very funny, but I think she taught me that life is a tragedy and comedy all at the same time. You know, you go from one to another all the time.
18th Emergency.
Yeah.
I'll read it. I'll read it. Brilliant. That's fantastic. I mean, I could carry on chatting to you for ages, because you know, I've got loads of questions and loads of things that I want to ask you, but I think probably I've taken up a lot of time, and you've been very generous to talk to me, so thank you. Is there anything else that you want to speak about Goody or Pippi or?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I wish I could say something really useful to children or people looking for creative ideas, and because I know how hard that can be.
Mm.
But I often think when I get letters from people who say I'd love to write or draw or make a story, what are your tips? And I often think that perhaps one of the starting points, a really useful starting point, is to write down or draw the particular, like the little details, not the big plot, not the huge story, not how do I end it. Is just to start with interesting pieces of dialogue, perhaps listen to the way people talk. I'm always listening to the way people talk. Or noting down things that happen. I have various notebooks and sometimes even write on the back of my checkbook and things that I see, if I see something really interesting, and I try and note it down with as much detail as possible, because it's amazing how you start losing the real focus of what you've seen or heard.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it personal and interesting to anyone else.
And that's interesting for me, because as a storyteller, I didn't read a great deal because I was always wanting to share stories. And so for me, it was very, very much about the oral and chatting to people. But what I'll say is something quite similar, which is begin by, if you don't like writing, then begin by just sharing a story about something that happened to you, which is particular. So, observe a spider creating a web and then just share that. So that's really interesting that we come from different places, but
and similar. I think it is so much, and I completely agree with you about you don't have to write it down. You could even record it if you've got any way of recording it. Not everyone does, or as you say it to someone. But I do think it is about finding something that interests you as well. Being interested, and actually I think we learn to be interested too. The more notice you take of things, the more interested you become. And it's why when I was doing the laureate thing, I was encouraging people to look down. You see all the most amazing things just dropped by accident or on purpose on the street, and I have found the most fascinating things, and I started taking photographs of them. But you could equally well just write down a list of all the things that you see, because it is extraordinary, and all of that becomes ideas. They don't just start off as this brilliant idea. It's always cumulative, I think.
I agree. That's a brilliant place to stop, isn't it? Thank you. So lovely to chat with you.
Nice to chat to you too.
And I'll see you online at the Cheltenham Literature Festival. In October.
Okay. Very good. All right.
Bye, Lauren. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.